And you wouldn't like that, would ya? Ha ha! That, would ya? Ha ha!
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the kennel. It's Foxhound coming back at you. Today, I have a very special guest. I have Kru Medhi from North Vancouver. He's the main instructor out of KB-1 and is a serious badass in terms of the Thai arts. Kru Medhi's main claim to fame, aside from his many accolades as a kickboxer, a pro boxer, a three-time PMF Muay Thai champion, a Canadian Muay Thai champion, a fighter at both Lumpini and Raja stadiums, and also one of the earliest adopters of Lethwai. I think you said you had fought Lethwai as far back as maybe 2005. Yeah.
That's right.
But really, the thing that interests me the most is the Muay Boran. For those of you who are not familiar with Muay Boran as opposed to Muay Thai, you're about to become familiar with such a thing. So, Kru Medhi, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Basically, why don't you tell everybody who you are, what got you into the martial arts, and how you've gotten where you are at this point.
Okay. Well, first of all, Matt, thanks for having me. I always love sharing, the stuff about Muay Thai, Muay Boran, and the art, because this art has been a big part of my life. And here I've been teaching in my gym for the last 25 years. I established my gym in '97, KB-1 in North Vancouver, BC. And my goal was always to better myself in the art. And, I started a lot with the kickboxing fights in my amateur days, and got into Muay Thai. And, to be honest with you, my first couple of Muay Thai fights, wasn't that great. I was like, okay, I want to go to the source. And that's when I got up. I went to Thailand, fortunately made my teacher, Mr. Naran Siri, Mr. Pak, and he taught me everything. And to this day, he's like a second father to me. And I started martial arts at the age of 10. I started with Kyokushin karate, and I always liked the kicking aspect of it. I was always really fascinated by martial arts, and watching Bruce Lee movies and all the other stuff. And so it's been a big part of my life since I was a kid. And so basically I went to Thailand, started training very hard, wanting to know every little detail. Basically, when I went there, I remember telling my teacher, I said, I want you to think that I don't know anything and teach me everything from the basics. And and to be honest with you, that's the best way to learn something. If you are humble enough to learn and you want to learn, that's the best way. And you start from the basics and you go from there. And he taught me everything, and all this stuff. And then I was very fascinated by the old style of Muay Thai, which was Muay Boran, and I started training that at the same time. And then I got into competing there, since there were no professional fights here in Canada. And I wanted to fight professionally. So I started competing there, did few fights, won all of them. And then I got invited to fight for a world championship after I fought on King's birthday with one Pan Mankon, which was one of the really top fighters in Thailand. He was 10-year number one at Raja Stadium. And I fought him on King's birthday. I did lose the fight decision, but that was one of my best fights ever. I learned so much from that. And to this day, I feel like that fight was a big lesson to me. To go 5 rounds with such a legend, and you know, I think I did pretty good, but yeah, just to learn and to see fight in front of 10,000 people outside King's birthday was just a phenomenal experience. And I learned, yes.
I was gonna say, I don't mean to interrupt, but for those who don't understand what a big deal it is to fight during the King's birthday in Thailand, could you just kind of quickly explain?
Yes, King's birthday is a huge celebration in the month of December. That was the old king, and the king that passed away. And that was a big celebration in Thailand. This celebration goes on for days, and they have, and of course, Muay Thai is, you know, a national sport of Thailand. They do competitions outdoor, and everybody can come. People can come. The streets are all blocked. Thousands and thousands of people around the ring watching the fights, all for free. There's fireworks. It's an amazing few nights of event. And of course, you have to be. There's few different competitions they do. They do single fights. They do tournament fights, and they do boxing sometimes during the day, and they do Muay Thai at night and Muay Boran exhibitions. It's just an amazing event, and you know, it was an honor to get invited to fight in that, and you know, because you know, it's not actually easy to get invited, right? And I was very happy, and I felt really lucky to be able to do that in front of thousands of people. It's extremely intimidating, but you know, I had my wife with me. She was a great support, Frankie. She was. There, you know, she's very good. She calms me down. So, and you know, she was with me, so it was a great support. She said, you know, just go in there, do what you do best, and you know, it really helps when you have that kind of support. You know, that's mentally, and, yeah, and so I went in there, and it was just an amazing feeling. It was like I felt so honored to be able to fight there. And with Muay Thai events, I have to tell you, because the Muay Thai it's very much a military control thing in Thailand as well. So when you go into a live event, an important event like that, you see this platform of VIPs, and you see, you know, generals or, you know, army heads with their uniforms sitting there watching the fights, and they have live traditional Muay Thai music playing for every round. So it's just, you know, I honestly get goosebumps talking about this every time, and it's honestly a crazy experience.
I can imagine. I didn't mean to derail you, but I just
no,
I'm aware of what a big deal that was, and I feel like I would like people to also sort of see that in their head. And it was interesting that you bring up the sort of military connection to it, because that wasn't something that I was fully aware of until I began training here in Fresno with Kru Medhi, and he sort of described that the name of his gym, Sasaprapa, is actually the general that he served under.
Yes.
In the army. But sorry, so continue. You were telling us you had fought at the King's birthday, and then your journey from there.
Yeah, so you know, after I fought there, I came back to Canada, and then I got a call shortly after that I was invited to fight for my first world title, and it was I believe in the March of 2001 that you know, I went to Thailand and I fought for my first world title. I had a knee injury at the time, but you know, which made it very difficult. I had actually a partial tear in my ACL, but I did train there. I dealt with the pain, went through it. Hurt it quite bad in the first round, but I did finish the fight by a knockout in the third round. Won my first WPMF world title. Came back again. Then I was invited to fight at Lumpini Stadium, which to me, that was like, oh my God, this is unreal. And I went back to Thailand, spent a good month and a half training there. Some of my students from here came, my wife came for support, like about a week before the fight. And then I fought at Lumpini Stadium, finished with 30-second knockout.
Oh, wow.
And I was actually the only foreigner that was allowed to fight that night. And I was actually foreigner that won the fight. There was a Japanese gentleman and an American gentleman that they fought, and they were right before me, and they both lost their fights. And then I won. And again, that opened another door for me for my second world title, which was in 2003. And I fought in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And I won that one in the first round, 2 minutes knockout. I fought this Raja Stadium champion, Fasiam. His name was Fasiam, and I beat him. And then in the December 2005, I was invited to fight in Raja Stadium. So because of running the gym and training, I didn't get a chance to go to Thailand earlier, but I decided to go about 10 days ahead of time. And again, some of my students, my wife, they wanted to join and watch me fight 3 days before. They said they're going to come later. So I went ahead of time, and I had some delay from the flights here and going through Taiwan. So I got to, instead of 11 in the morning, I got to Bangkok at 1 in the afternoon. And my teacher came to pick me up at the airport, and my luggage wasn't there. So they said I have to wait an hour for my luggage to come in with the next plane. So I went out. I didn't want him to, I wanted to make him, I didn't want to make him wait too long. So I went out. I said, Master Pak, I'm waiting for my luggage to come. And he told me he can't really wait for me because he has this Letway fights to go to. And I said, Letway fights? What's going on? He said, yeah, it's the first time it's been legalized. There is a river festival. River festival is another big event. They do river racing, and then they have the Muay Thai or Letway fights right beside the river. Thousands of people again outside. And I told him, well, what's the problem? Because I felt like he's really stressed out. He said there is a fighter that he was supposed to take to this fight, a Russian fighter, and he's MIA. He's missing in action. And I'll get into that in a second. Please don't let me forget, because that happens a lot. That happens a lot in Thailand. Okay. So I told him, I said, can I take his place? And he's like, okay, let me make a call. So at
this point, did you have any idea what Letway was?
Yes, I knew what it is. I was familiar with the style of fighting because he had actually asked me to go fight in the Thai-Burmese border a few years earlier. And I said no, because I wasn't aware of how legitimate these fights are at the border. Okay. So I didn't want to really get involved in that. Right. And because it's just the matter of trusting the organization and all that stuff. Right. And I just wanted to be legitimate the whole time. And so I was aware, and I was training Muay Boran. I had trained some, Letway style fighting, which is very similar to Muay Boran. It's just the Burmese call it Letway. It's very similar to a Muay Boran fight. I think I was just excited. I got to Thailand, and I said to him, he made a phone call. He said, yeah, no problem. I'll wait till you get your luggage. We'll go drop it off at the hotel. The fight starts at 4 p.m. So I remember getting my luggage, I sat in the taxi, and I was like, oops, what have I done? I feel really tired, and I felt really tired and jet lagged. And anyways, I actually had one of my students, Roberto, he was here from Mexico with me, and he was extremely nervous. He said, oh, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, don't worry. I'm
nervous just listening to the story.
I know it's a crazy story. We went to the hotel, drop off my stuff, grab my cup, grab my mouthpiece, and we head out to the festival. And they give us special Muay Boran shorts. And then I sat down. The trainer wrapped my hand with a little bit of gauze and tape, extremely thin. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're fighting with this. And they're like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, okay. And I wanted to just double check the rules. And the rules of Letway, if you're not familiar with it, you fight 5 rounds. And if you do not knock out your opponent in a manner that he can't continue. And the reason I say that, because if the opponent goes down and there is a knockout or knockdown, they actually give them a few minutes to recover and they can come back in. Not like others, MMA or boxing or kickboxing or actual Muay Thai, person goes down, 8 count, you can't continue, you don't fight. They actually give you time to recover. Mm-hmm. So if you do not knock out your opponent completely and he can't continue, you don't win the fight. So there is no point system. You fight the 5 3-minute rounds, and at the end of the day, if you are both standing, it's considered a draw. And when I got in the ring, I had to fight a Burmese opponent. I was like, halfway through first round, I was like, and this fight is on YouTube. You guys can watch it. If you put in Medhi fighting Muay Boran, you can watch it. Okay. I was, honestly, and I kid you not, Matt, I was hearing voices in my head saying, what the hell are you doing? And it's like, it was very, very different. And yes. When you don't have gloves, when you have, and to be honest with you, the thing I was really most worried about was actually hurting my hands. Mm-hmm. Because 9 days later, I had a fight at Raja, also scheduled. And I was like, oh my God, what if I break my hands? Because you're hitting bone to bone, you're hitting, for the uppercuts, you're hitting elbows and all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So you have to really be aware of how you actually position your fist, because you have to open and close your hands at all times for blocking and, for elbows. And of course, there's headbutts in there as well. Mm-hmm. So you have to be aware of all that. He actually landed a couple of really good elbows on my face, which I later on found out that it actually broke my tooth in the back of my jaw. I got in the corner, my eye was cut, it was all fine. And I had a talk with my teacher, and he told me, he said, when I tell you you go in the second round, when I tell you to push forward and unleash, you go in and you do whatever you have to do. Because I was like, okay, this second round I'm going in because my legs felt like I'm in a really bad dream and I cannot run. It was like that thing, the jet lag had kicked in. Anyway, so I'm like, okay, it's this round, this is it. It's either me or him. So I went in and, I was pushing him back. He did a kick to me. I countered with a punch. And then that's when I could hear Master Pack telling me, okay, go. And then I put him in the corner and I unleashed some combos, and I was able to finish him with a punch to the temple. So
excellent.
Yeah.
How long do they give you? So for most of us, especially now that, we've become so aware of concussions and everything like that, it does not sound all that safe to let someone get knocked out and then just give them a couple of minutes to get up. How long do they give you? Was it like 5 minutes?
I believe they give you anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. Okay. Please don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. But they give you quite a bit of time. Mm. I have to tell you, man, that's not a kind of fighting that you can do on a regular basis. That is not something you can do like Muay Thai, like some Thai fighters do in Thailand. Once a month they fought, or once every 2 weeks. This is a type of fighting that can be extremely, extremely harmful. Mm-hmm. And to you and this is not a style of fighting that you can do all the time. Mm-hmm. And I know it happens in Burma a lot, but a lot of these guys, a lot of these kids have to fight a lot because of poverty and stuff like that. So it is kind of sad when you look at it that way. So
well, that's still a really intense story. So okay, what happened to the Russian? Did he just get cold feet? Did he go, oh,
okay, good thing you brought that up. So throughout the years that I've been going to Thailand, I've seen this a lot. And there is a lot of fighters that come there. They're excited. They want to compete. And I tell you this because my teacher, Master Pak, had a gym that had a camp gym called Rampo Gym that we used to train at all the time. And I'd taken some students from here. And, one of my trainers, Master Lek, he was, a great pad holder. And, there were some really good trainers out of that gym. And throughout my years, I met some really, really good fighters. that some Russian fighters, and that then went on and did fought at K1, and they went on to be really good fighters, and that fought. I think there is a fighter called Jabbar. He had actually fought Bukau. He fought at K1 Max. They're all coming out of Rumpel. But at the same time, I met a lot of people that come in extremely excited, and not to take anything away from them. Good practitioners. You see them practice, you see them train, great skill. But when it came down to the actual fight, and they actually come in asking and begging to fight in this places like Lumpini, fighting at King's birthday, fighting at Raja, fighting at, but when it came down to actual fighting, I think they get cold feet, and they actually, they call them MIAs. They actually miss in action. Like, you call whoever they know there, they might have a girlfriend, they might have a wife, or they might be with a friend. They don't even know where they are. They just take off.
They disappear.
Yes. One story is before I fought at Lumpini Stadium, my teacher had, Mr. Naransi had an English gentleman that had gone to him and told him that I really want to fight at Lumpini Stadium. And he's like, well, listen, you have to prove yourself here with other fights before I can get you a fight there. He's like, no, I beg you. And the reason for him wanting to fight, because this is the story he told me. He wanted to become a bodyguard, a royal bodyguard in London, and for part of the royalty. And apparently, if you have that Lumpini Stadium, your father Lumpini Stadium on your resume, is better than having a 10-year bodyguard experience.
Okay.
So he really wanted to get that on his resume, and going through all sorts of channels and going through all sorts of different things. My teacher said, okay, fine, I'll get you a fight there. And, got him a fight, went for a weigh-in. Night of the fight, didn't show up.
Oh.
When MIA. That made my Lumpini Stadium authorities told my teacher that he cannot bring a fighter to Lumpini for 2 years.
Oh,
because
so he took a hit for doing that.
He took a hit. Yes, the trainers, the managers take a big hit, because over there it's all about honor. It's all about word. When your word means something. And when you say, okay, I'm going to bring this fighter, and your program really depends. They make a program. They go through a lot of different things to put this fighter there, and They make a contract, and all of a sudden this person doesn't show up.
Right.
They can't really go to the fighter. They go to the manager, to the trainer. So he wasn't allowed to bring anybody in for 2 years, and I was actually the first one that he was allowed to bring back after 2 years in 2000, right before 2002.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the story about MIAs.
Anyone who has fought in a full contact setting, a true full contact setting, particularly. I mean, there's a lot of things that people call full contact. Definitely goes through that moment, especially if it's not their first time, when they're like, I don't have to do this again. I already showed myself. Or, when it's your first time, I think sometimes, I know when I went into my first Dog Brother gathering, I just didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't realize how intense life was about to become. But then, when you have any setting, be it something like Lumpini Stadium or a Dog Brothers gathering, when you walk in there and you feel it for the first time, I feel like it either brings it out of you or makes you go, where are my shoes and my backpack? I need to get out of here right now.
Yeah.
I've made a grave mistake. So it does. I mean, I couldn't imagine going all the way to Thailand and then being like, I don't want to do this. But, I also can put myself in the shoes of someone seeing something from the outside and wanting to do it, but not quite realizing what's actually at stake. With a guy like that Russian gentleman who went MIA, now we know a little more about Letway. It's something that's not because of the internet and because of guys
Mm-hmm.
like David Leduc has obviously got up
Yes.
there and made sure that everybody knows what Lethwei is now.
Yeah,
But
that's great. That's
you know,
really
back
good.
in the day, no one knew what that was.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about early 2000s, I mean, people didn't even know what Muay Thai was. You know, it was.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%.
Really until Anderson Silva showed up and grabbed Rich Franklin by the back of his head. And even then, people didn't know what it was. Rich Franklin didn't even know what it was. He fought him the second time. The same thing happened to him. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear. I that was one of the few things that I wasn't aware of ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I had, you know, Ice Dog had previously prepared me to talk to you a little bit, but that's really cool. And I'm definitely going to find that Lethwei fight.
It's actually very interesting when you are when you're listening to the commentating on that fight. They actually call me a Russian in Thai.
Yeah.
Like the word Russia in Thai is Russian. And if you keep watching, I think the commentators, the name even haven't changed, you know, on their sheet. So they
thought you were the other guy.
They thought I'm the actual original guy. That's the funny part. Like when you're watching the show. Yeah, and you know what, Matt? At the end of the day, it comes down to, you know, and I always say this. If you are getting into something like this, you have to, you can have, and this is a conversation I had with my teacher, and he told me a long time ago, and, you know, I never forget, he said, you know, you can have the best skill in the world, you can have the best speed in the world, you can be the greatest athlete in the world, but if you don't have the heart, it is very hard, and nobody can give you that. You either have it or you don't. So if you decide to do something like this, you first better look at yourself and say, do I have the heart to do this? And, you know, because when you're up there alone competing, it's all you, you know? And then, you know, it's not a team sport. There is, you know, it's you and your heart. And I'm putting myself in an example of, like I told you, I heard voices in my head when I'm doing that. And it wasn't only that fight that you hear voices. It's almost all the time. And you basically have to really push yourself from inside. You have to, your soul almost comes out and helps you if you want to. And if you don't have that, it makes it very difficult to compete. And you know, it's one of those things that no teacher, no gym, no skill, nothing can give you. It's got to be in you to do something like that. And you've competed before yourself, and you know how it is. And imagine somebody that doesn't have it inside. You know, it's not right for them to get in there. So it's something that it's very, very important to look at and do some basically soul searching and, you know yourself, know whether this is, you know, you like to do. And, you know, I always go back to what Mike Tyson has always said, you know, he said everybody has a plan and they get punched in the face. And it's so true, because I've had so many people, so many hundreds and hundreds of people come through my gym during the last quarter of a century and telling me, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And then the first time they get hit in the ring, boom, everything is out the door. So, you know, that's the first thing somebody should look at before they even think of competition. Right. So
I recently in the last year or so, I've been training a young guy from the area in just different things, mostly stick fighting. But right away, he said, you know, I'd really like to learn some empty hands. So I said, all right. And he's a big kid. He's like, you know, probably 6'4", and he's about now he's lost a bunch of weight. He's about 260 now, but he was around 300 pounds when we started training together. And so I knew like I was probably not going to be teaching him high kicking or anything like that. So I was like, well, I'll show you some basic boxing and then some Filipino tricks and some elbows and things like that. And I said to him, has anyone ever hit you before? And he goes, no. I said, you know, your dad's never hit you? No. No, nobody's ever punched you at school? No. I said, so you don't know what it feels like? No. And I was like, all right. So we were going to do the drill with 1 foot in the tire. And I said, all right, when we're out in a parking lot or a field or something, I'm not afraid of you. I can get away. But for those of you that don't know, I weigh about 175 pounds. So when we were ankle to ankle in a tire, I said to him, listen, man, I can't get away from you right now if you really get angry. And he just played football. He's a strong guy. And I said, so I'm going to hit you once. And if you don't like it, tell me. Just say you don't like it. We won't ever do it again like that or whatever. And as soon as he said, okay, I hit him right then. Like I didn't give him any time. Not hard. And we had 16-ounce gloves on. But I like popped him one time in the face. And he immediately started to laugh. And I went, oh, perfect. and the change in this young man from then to now, even just the things that he said, because now we've done tons of boxing and stick work and all this other stuff. He's come, we did a thing up in the mountains in April, and he got to put on MMA gloves and spar with people he didn't know that weren't, trying to be nice to him. And he did great. And, he's had nothing but confidence come from this. He's even said, even for being a big guy, he's like, I never felt like, okay, this person couldn't hurt me. Like he's like, I feel this confidence I didn't have before. But that's something you don't know until you know, right? Like you said, you can't give someone heart. They either have it or they don't. I feel like you can dig it from yourself, not necessarily the very first time you ever get hit. You're going to learn that about yourself. Like it might take you a little bit, but there's no one else that can hand you, you can make someone stronger, faster, more technically skilled, but you can't fix it if someone doesn't want to be hit. I don't necessarily like being hit. Like if anyone that's ever fought me, like I get out of the way a lot, but it's not running. There's a difference between just turtling up and being like, the beating will stop eventually.
Well, no one really likes getting hit. I think that's a complete different issue. And we have to learn not to get hit, but you have to also know that when you go into something like that, you're bound to get hit at some point. That's part of the sport. I mean, you can't just think, okay, I'm going to go in there and not get hit. That's, unless you're Superman, that's not going to work. Right. So you are going to get hit. How you deal with that, that's a different story. Okay?
For sure. For sure. One of the things that you had mentioned to me when we were talking off the air about, Muay Boran being sort of the precursor to Muay Thai. That's something that I would really like people to kind of hear a little bit about, because maybe the only Muay Boran anyone's ever seen is, Tony Jaa doing the theatrical version of it. And then they don't even know it.
For sure. Well, no one really knows, Matt, where the actual, to be honest with you, the art originates from, because, as you know, the map of the world, everything is changed. And that part of the world was probably all, same at some point, couple of thousand years ago. But, the Thais claim that Muay Boran is, part of Thailand. When you look at the old map, they say, okay, this style is from here, that style from there. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the word actual Muay Boran. So the word Muay Boran is actually not a style by itself. It's actually a combination of different styles that originate from different parts of Thailand. So in the old days, they had the north part of Thailand, and they had the Wayut, they call it Wayut. And then they had the south part of Thailand, we call it Muchaya, and that's where most of my training and most of my Muay Boran skills are from with my teacher. Then you got the east part, which was Korat, Muay Korat. And then you had the center, which was called Lopburi. And the other side, West didn't even, like, there's no one, like even Lopburi, Wayut, Korat are very, very basically, the style has died. So the combination of all these styles were called Muay Boran. Okay. Muay Boran was made for combat. It was made for actual combat between, the countries, if they're fighting, if they're in war, and they use these styles, and the army and at the time the Thai army would use, they all be trained at this, and they had minor differences in their style, like in their stances, and the Korat guys especially, they were bigger guys, so they use more strength walking forward. The Muchaya guys were smaller fishermen, more trickier fighters. Lapuri also pretty tricky. So the style was into two divisions. One was empty hand. Mm-hmm. So you use your fist, your elbows, your headbutt, your knees, your shins, your foot. So the art of 9 limbs, mm-hmm. including the headbutt, and the elbows and knees, especially for close range combat. And then the Krabi Kerbang, which you're familiar with, which was the weapon part, long stick, short stick, swords, double swords, knife, all that stuff. So a Muay Boran practitioner would do empty hand, also would do Krabi Kerbang. So they'll be expert at both. Mm-hmm. And this style was, it's like I said, it was made for war. So it's extremely, extremely dangerous and deadly. And there was, it wasn't for the ring sport. So it was for combat. So about 300 years ago, King Rama V had an event. And in this event, he was, I don't know the specifics, but my teacher told me he was celebrating something for one of his generals. And he said, what I want to do is I want to have a Muay Boran competition between the top 100 fighters in Thailand. And the top 2 fighters at the end will become royal bodyguards, which at the time was probably the best job in the world.
Okay.
To live in the palace, to protect the king, and go the top 2, or if one of them dies at the end, because in this competitions fighters die. Mm-hmm. And at the time, he just didn't want to do that. He also wanted to show, because there was a lot of Portuguese influence going into Siam at the time, which is now called Thailand, trying to infiltrate into the government, into the country, trying to take over.
Wait a minute, so Europeans were meddling in the politics of another place? That's weird.
I know.
Sorry.
Yeah, so no, all good. It's perfectly said. Anyway, so so he wanted to show them, listen, we are not a nation to be messed around with. So he said, from dusk till dawn, we fight, no stopping. And at the end, there was a Muchaya fighter versus a Korat fighter, and Muchaya fighter wins. And they both become royal bodyguards. And since then, this competition is no referees, nothing. It was either by knockout, by somebody giving up, tapping, just like other sports you see, mm-hmm. or maybe if the fighter becomes paralyzed or dead, because there is so many different techniques in Muay Boran that can actually really be harmful. Anyways, so this happens, and then since then, the competition becomes something of a fad, and they're like, okay, now we like the competition, we want to keep going. And it was up to about 150 years ago, which they said, oh, we need to change a lot of things because fighters are dying. So they came up with gloves instead of fighting with kachiaks, because kachiaks is the rope that you see.
Okay.
The fighters wear.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah. In Thailand, they have kachiak fights right now, but when you look at it, and I'm just going to make your audience aware of this, that the way they wear it right now is not the way they're supposed to wear it in the old days. It actually takes between 45 minutes to an hour to do one hand.
Okay.
So to do it properly, and it's extremely, extremely hard and dangerous. And, you know, it's basically you can put your hand into a tiger's mouth and it won't go through. That's how hard that thing is. And it will stop you from cutting from swords and stuff like that. But anyways, they used to fight with that. So they changed that. They said, we're going to introduce gloves. They're going to introduce the ring. They're going to take a lot of techniques out of the equation. Back breakings, neck breakings, a lot of different things. And also, this is something else that a lot of people are not aware, that Muay Boran actually had a lot of ground fighting. But the ground fighting is very different than doing jiu-jitsu or wrestling, because when you went on the ground, it was either way, right away into either breaking a bone or punching and striking. So it wasn't like you were wrestling for an hour on the ground, till you get somebody tapping out. No, it's very effective to the point. And they took that out of the equation. And then throughout the years, the sport became Muay Thai, which what you see in the ring today is called sport Muay Thai. So there's a lot of techniques that are not allowed. There's a lot of techniques done differently in the actual Muay Thai fights. And that's the main difference between the two.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you intend to have anyone have a long career. I mean, you know, you've got guys that are 125 and 5, but if you were having people die, those 5 would have been 1.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, one other thing that people don't necessarily know that much about, if they've only watched Muay Thai maybe on YouTube, or are only familiar with it through seeing like maybe lion fights or it being referred to in UFC, is the gambling aspect of it, and how that sort of changes the flow versus something. I know, so the first school that I trained at back home was affiliated with Sitjotong, so Mark Delagrati and that. And so I don't have the accent like Mark does, but he's from, you know, my area. And so I've heard him talk about it before. But I would like to, you know, have it kind of said here by you, sort of, how does that affect things as the fighter?
Okay. So it's very interesting, because in Thailand, gambling is illegal.
Right.
So you can't go and play cards for money on the street. You can't have casinos. You can't even roll the dice in the ground and the cops will come and say, what the hell are you guys doing, right?
Yeah.
They do it in the back alleys, but
sure.
But you can bet on fighters, you can bet on horses, you can bet on, you know, it's very strange that way. But when you go to, there's few venues that are like Lumpini Stadium, even King's Birthday, Rogers Stadium, Channel 5 fights. The Channel 5 fights are fights that happen in actual TV studio.
Okay.
Very small place with bleachers. You know, very small area for foreigners, and no foreigners are allowed to fight in there. Only Thai fights, live on TV. And to be honest with you, Matt, I've never seen anything like that, because when you go and sit down and you watch, you will not understand the betting system that's happening there. It's like it's like not knowing what's happening in the stock market, and that's their stock market.
Okay.
And you know, one person, and it's all sign language. They do it with their hands, and they are yelling, and it's all on. It's all. I asked my teacher once. I said, "Okay, if one person is betting with somebody, how do they know they're actually going to come and pay them at the end of the night? You know, how are they going to not even find them? Because it's all based on honor, and they believe a lot in karma. If they don't do something bad's going to happen to them. And so, you know, there's a lot of betting happening. I still to this day don't know their system, but you're as a foreigner not allowed to do the betting. Only Thai people do it. It's extremely interesting to watch. It's like, wow, how did they do it? And every round, you can change your bet. So you don't have to be stuck with one fighter. You can change your bet to the other fighter. You can change the odds. Odds change round to round.
Sure.
Now, the interesting part with the fighter is that the fighter, when he goes and sits in the corner after a round, you know, here when we fight, or, you know, in Europe, or when you watch fights, boxing, UFC, all these other things, you see the coach talking to the fighter.
Right.
Over there, the coach doesn't talk to the fighter. You see people come down from the stands, or all these people that have bet on these fighters, and somebody, they come do this, do that, because they have so much money invested in this fighter, right?
Okay.
And the interesting thing is that they would tell this fighter, they will give him an incentive. Okay, if you go in now and you do this round, I'm going to give you an extra 10,000 baht, 20,000 baht, 30,000 baht. So they give him an incentive.
Okay.
And again, this becomes back to that honor thing, because that fighter probably forgets who told him this, but they'll come and pay them at the end of the night.
Right.
And it's so interesting. And the fighters there, it's basically like the old, Roman gladiator days, because they're fighting for the people. And a fighter may not necessarily be really good at boxing, but going there and doesn't really want to do the punches, because the people want to see knees and kicks, because they're worth more points and all that. So they really go by what people want, and they get the incentive from betting. Like, honestly, with the Channel 5, it was very interesting, because I remember once looking at the crowd and seeing one guy had like a tray on his hand, and he had like probably about 10 cell phones on there, and he's talking to every single one of them, talking with this. And it was interesting, because I asked my teacher, I said, what's he doing? He said, those 10 phones are actually, he's acting like an agent. So he has actually people sitting at home watching the fights on TV and telling him on the phone who to bet on and how much to bet on. So imagine how hard that is. And I'm like, oh my God, that will give me the biggest headache in the world. That's not for me, man, not for me.
Right.
So that's how the betting works there. Yeah, it's cool. Insane. Yeah,
I've never really had it explained to me from the point of view of a fighter, where I didn't know about the people coming down and being like, listen, if you land a spinning back elbow sometime this round, I got 10,000 baht for you right here.
And that happened to me, and the fights that I've had there, I've always had people come to me and say, do this, do that, and especially me, because I was mostly the underdog. And after first round or so, all of a sudden it's like, okay, the betting, and sometimes, because I was a foreigner, they wouldn't come directly talk to me. They would go directly talk to my corner. Right. And then my corner will tell me afterwards, yeah, this person bet on you, I'm like, okay, the money can go to my teacher. That's okay. I just give it to him. It's right. It was very interesting, right? So I know they actually love that. It's a big part of them going watching fights every week, right? So
the betting part.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Do you find because you're talking about having gone over there in the early 2000s versus today, where some of these camps have become a lot more popular and a lot more I was trying to come up with saying it in a little bit of a more respectful way. Do you see like a watering down at all of the experience for a foreigner going over there, where now they're like, all right, we know you want to come here to Tiger Muay Thai or Fairtex or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you see that as that, or do you just see it as the positive for the Thai people to be making more money?
Okay, yeah, you can look at it a couple of different ways. To be honest with you, it's like you said, you wanted to say it in a very nice way that, it's been popular. It's been very popular. And, I like the fact that more people are aware of, getting introduced to Muay Thai and what Muay Thai is. But the authenticity of Muay Thai is changing. When you go to a camp down in town, like when I went, in late 90s, early 2000, it was very hard to even find a place that you can train at as a foreigner. Mm-hmm. And, I was very lucky to have met my teacher by Lumpini Stadium and talked to him, and we got to know each other. But it was very hard, because not the actual true Muay Thai camps wouldn't even let you in. Right. As a foreigner. They kept it. But Muay Thai today it's not just for fighters. It's more. It's a lot for. It's very recreational. It's good for fitness, for losing weight. So there is, when you go to Thailand now, especially you go to Bangkok, you will see so many indoor, very similar to the gyms that they have here in North America and Europe, Muay Thai gyms, but they don't show you, you don't learn proper techniques. It's mostly for people who want to go lose weight. It's warm. I'm going to get a good sweat out of my workout. I'm going to skip. I'm going to hit some pads. And because of the language barrier between the trainers and the foreigners that go, it's very hard for them to teach you proper techniques. Now, if you go to places like Tiger Muay Thai or American Top Team, I don't know, whatever these high gyms have their places there, the ones that they really cater to as far as technique, sparring, and all that stuff, and doing proper training is the fighters.
Right.
Everybody else will go in. They will say, okay, you know, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to come hit some pads and, you know, lose some weight and sweat. Okay, fine. So there's different trainers. Mm-hmm. So you can be classified as an A trainer, B trainer, C trainer, D trainer. So when you go in, you don't know anybody. You're not a fighter. You just want to train. Okay, here you go. He's a D trainer. You pay this much. You train with him.
So you basically get cardio kickboxing with elbows.
And knees.
Yeah, and knees, yes.
Yeah, basically. And I've had so many people come here to me and say, you know, I want to train. And I'm like, okay, have you trained Muay Thai before? They're like, oh, yeah, I spent a month in Thailand and this and that. I'm like, okay, what did you do? Where did you go? And looking at them with one session, half an hour of training, I would know what they know, what they don't know. And unfortunately, they don't know proper Muay Thai. And you have to start them from the basics. Mm-hmm. Basic stance, basic footwork, and teaching them the proper way, because that stuff is very much not existence over there. It's either you know things, you go there and you want to, you know, improve on your skill. Like there's a lot of UFC fighters that go there. There's a lot of Glory fighters that go there. There's a lot of different organizations that go there. They want to improve their training. They want to work on their altitude training, different you know, environment, hitting pads, different things, get to know elbows, get to know clinch, get to know knees. But there's also people that go in, they just want to train. And that's where the difference comes in. But it has, to a lot of extent, has become very, very recreational.
Mm-hmm. That's it's something that probably in like 2006, I read this book by a man named Sam Sheridan, The Fighter's Heart, and he had gone to Fairtex like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and you know, he wrote this book. He's written a couple of other ones. Great writer. I like his stuff, but he also referred to going back there again. And he had said it had very much become commercialized, and yes. I've even heard that about like the Shaolin Temple in China, that you know, they're selling it now, which you know, for a country like Thailand, I look at that as a positive thing for them, because it gets their culture. It gets their culture out there, and it does bring income to people that maybe wouldn't have had opportunities, you know, to make that kind of money. You know, those D-class trainers, would those men have had men, women? I don't know if they have lady trainers as well, but would they have even had a job? Yeah. Would they have been, you know, doing like a pedicab or something? And
yeah, that's a really good point, Matt. And I'm really happy that way too, because it does bring them money, and it does, you know, to a certain extent, it also introduces people, because somebody can train and say, oh, okay, I want to continue this, and it comes back and helps gyms like mine and other martial arts Muay Thai gyms. And it's actually, you're very right with creating jobs, because now there is some hotels that you can go to, and the hotel will actually offer you, oh, would you like to add a Muay Thai package? And it's true, you know, they have these hotels in near the river in Bangkok, and you go and all of a sudden, oh, you can train with the world champion, whatever, for this much extra per night. And then you get like few rounds with a guy in the ring the next day. It's very interesting, you know, and how they are trying to, you know, they have something, why not make some money out of it? And, you know, they rely a lot on tourism. They rely a lot on different things. And Muay Thai is actually, you know, one of, I think, number one growing sport in the world right now, not only because of that, also because the MMA fighters, all these, they're realizing how effective the Muay Thai, the actual real Muay Thai skill can help you in a fight. And the clinching, the knees, the elbows, and the low kicks, and how it's going to help. And that's why it's growing really fast. The Muay Thai products, it's like, I cannot believe because I buy products here, bring it to a pro shop and for my students, and I cannot believe how much they've actually gone up in price, and quite a bit. Like shorts that used to be $20, it's $100 now, and it's crazy. And it just shows the popularity of the sport. In Europe, in Australia, in Africa, in Canada, not as much yet, which I hope it will, especially by Olympics trying to introduce it now. And
that was big news.
And I know it's been popular in US for a long time. Yeah, that was actually a very good news, because for the long time they didn't want to have Muay Thai because of the World Thai connected to Muay. They didn't want to have a sport that the country's name is in, and they didn't want to call it kickboxing because it's really not kickboxing. So I was very happy to see that they're trying to introduce it in, and they're going to have some exhibition fights and so forth. So it is very good for the country of Thailand, for the national sport to get exposed like this.
Yeah, that's great. I really, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the growth of Muay Thai. Lethwai as well. I know that's something that, people are starting to, it's still not legal here. I don't think you can even teach it here. But there's,
I don't see, sorry to cut you off. I don't see why they won't allow it, since they have the bare knuckle boxing. I know there's other stuff, elbows and knees and all that, but at the end of the day, a Lethwei fighter relies a lot on their punching. And punching is, because, to actually execute that, that's another story. Maybe another day we can talk about this. To actually execute certain techniques in Muay Thai, like knees and elbows, it's not easy. And I don't see why, but I can see it being more introduced in the near future, and maybe with a little bit more controlled, maybe a little bit more modified, and it would be interesting to see and to see it more exposed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in America, they're gonna have to do away with that "let the guy get knocked out and wake him up" thing, because I don't know how much they're gonna. I think no commission in this country is gonna sanction that.
No, and it's a good thing you brought that up, Matt, because I think even the Burmese are working on stopping that. The recovery part is, and I really agree to that, because I do not see the benefit and any sorts of benefit or any sort of advantage to a person who's been knocked out or knocked down. They can't continue to give them a few minutes to recover. That to me, it's not a good thing. And they're working on stopping that, because that anything head trauma, it should be really carefully looked at.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those of us who play the game of getting hit in the head sometime. I mean, when it was a good one, and when it was just normal. I've been getting hit in the head since I was a little kid. I played ice hockey and football and lacrosse and rugby as an adult. And, you get used to a certain amount of contact, but then, anything that puts you down for 5 minutes, that should probably be the end of your day. Exactly. But there are so many guys that are so tough. It's, that they'll get up and they'll just be like, nope, I'm good. And you're not good. Like, you're definitely not.
Exactly.
I would be interested to know how many, like what the statistic is on guys that have been knocked down, given their time to recover, getting back up, and then suffering a worse knockout shortly down the line, or toughing through the rest of the fight because they got a head full of rocks. And then, how bad are their headaches for the next amount of time, or like what happens to them when they're old? Watching guys like Muhammad Ali trying to sign their signature, but their hand is all over the place. Or even talking to Kru Medhi about some of the guys that he had fought with when he was young, being essentially a functional vegetable as an adult is like, that's scary.
Yeah, it is scary. And, it's, I was lucky throughout my career not to be knocked out at any point, but I've got knocked down. But it is very scary. It really, looking at a lot of fighters and reading some stuff, and anything to do with the head, any sport that a lot of head contact is involved, it's not healthy. And it's got to be minimized. And and I know we choose a career, we want to be fighters and all that, but that style of fighting, like, to be honest with you, right now, when I see the boxing in Olympics and they've taken the headgear off, I do not agree with that, to be honest with you. And when you are an amateur and you're trying to build a career and you're trying to move on, I think the headgear should have been in there. And whoever came up with that, I don't know if they did it for get more audience and stuff like that. That to me is not acceptable. And we have the same situation here in BC, in Canada. The boxing commission controls the fights and all that, and they're like, okay, if you've had 3 fights, if your first 3 fights with gear, the 4th one you can take it off. To me, that's not acceptable, because you're an amateur fighter. This is not your living. You're not making money out of this. And if, for example, I have guys here that want to compete, they've had their 3 fights, and they're plumbers, or they are construction workers, and their body, they rely on their body making money the next day. So when they're going to go in there with no shin guards and no headgear, they're risking. And to me, that's not acceptable. 3 fights is not enough for you to take your gear off. I can understand 10, I can understand maybe even 15. 3 is not enough. So you need to be as healthy as you possibly can before you enter your professional career. And you get into professional career, and that's only if you want to become a professional. That's when you decide, okay, I want to make money out of this. I want to make a living. This is my career. Okay, I'm ready to take it off. So it is something that we're dealing with every day. And I think the bottom line, and being in this sport, training fighters, fighting myself, at the end of the day, the health and well-being of the person is very, very important.
Absolutely. And as a trainer, you develop such a feeling towards the guys that train with you that the last thing you want to see them.
Yes.
Exactly. The last thing you want to see is them enter into a situation that's not safe for them.
Exactly.
And their opponent, you know what I mean? We're not, I think until, okay, I've had some fights with people that I didn't like, but for the most part, we like the people, you know what I mean?
Well,
unless you're a professional
too, right?
And you're really building the hype for your fight, or you do have some professional rival or something like that. But yeah, they're people too, and they put in the same the same amount of care and heart and everything into their sport. And the last thing that you really want is to be the person who ends someone's career. Like I said, until you're talking about when you got we've now all had to watch Conor McGregor for the last couple of weeks melt down with his broken leg and run his mouth. Yeah. But I tell you, if I were Dustin Poirier, I wouldn't care that much about his well-being the next time we fight. But at the same time, there's so few actual occasions like that. When you go out there as as a competitor, or whether you're an amateur or whether you're a professional guy, you have to have respect for your opponent, because they're doing the same thing you're doing. And
exactly,
you can look at anyone who's got the courage to step into a ring or whatever structure you're within, an octagon, and that makes them different from a regular person, and you have to have that camaraderie.
Absolutely. And that's something I tell my fighters, and I tell them, and I say, I have this talk with them a night before they go into the fight or the same day. I always tell them, I said, listen, I'm really, because I want to see a fighter, when a fighter gets in the ring, you have to have the least amount of stress. Mm-hmm. You have to be 80% in your mind clear of everything. Mm-hmm. If you have any family issues, if you have any sort of stress, that will affect you. Mm-hmm. More than affects you physically. Okay, you have a little bit of injury, you deal with it, you don't think about it, you go in there. But up here is so important. And I always want to take a lot of stress away from my fighters. So I tell them, listen, when you go up there, I don't want you to think about the result ahead of time, thinking, oh my God, am I going to lose? Am I going to disappoint my teacher? Am I going to do this? I take that away. I take that equation out of I take that out of the equation. I tell them, listen, just you guys stepping in there, you guys are all winners to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud of you for you just stepping in there. Mm-hmm. As long as you go in there and do your best, go in there, do your best, you won for me. Whether, the result doesn't matter to me. Whether your hand goes up or not, your hand is up by me anyways. Mm-hmm. Just stepping in there and do what you've done in the gym, do your best. Mm-hmm. So, that's very important. And it's a sport. And I know you go in there, you got to respect the other person. Mm-hmm. This is not a person who's attacked you and wants to really harm you in the street. That is a totally different game. Mm-hmm. Like when I teach self-defense seminars and, to women and men, and I say, okay, if somebody has put on both hands on your throat, they want to choke you, you do whatever you can to get out of it. You want to elbow them, you want to do this, you want to do this, that's fine. You do whatever you can. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally different environment. And when you go in there, of course, that person has family, that person has teachers, that person has, and you have to respect that they are in there as well. You have to respect them. And, I know there's a lot of people don't respect each other, but mostly I think, to be honest with you, mostly it's for show, to get more audience and stuff like that. Behind the scenes, they're drinking their champagne or whatever they do after. Yeah. So together and partying together. But, it is so important to respect each other in the ring. Extremely important.
Absolutely. That's something with the Dog Brothers. We give a massive amount of respect to someone just for showing up and getting out there and putting themselves on the line and giving the same thing that they're getting from someone else. It's not easy to explain to people that don't fight that you're not angry. You know what I mean? Maybe you are. Exactly. Maybe you have something in your life and you're able to channel your anger or whatever, but you're not right. You're not generally angry at the person in front of you.
That's right. Yeah, you're channeling that energy through this sport and through and it's a good treatment. It's a good therapy for people who have major anger issues when they go to boxing gyms or they go to Muay Thai gyms and they're training and they channel that bad energy towards something positive. Mm-hmm. And why not make a career out of it? So
I mean, it teaches a humility. I think probably the best sport for humility is jiu-jitsu, because it doesn't matter how big you are, how strong, like you're gonna get choked many times throughout the day. But for myself, I mean, Muay Thai was what taught me more. But when I came to jiu-jitsu, it was after having been soundly beaten by a jiu-jitsu guy in an MMA fight. And I was like, you know what I need? To learn some of that, because he crushed me. Yeah. But
I mean, it can happen in boxing, it can happen in Muay Thai. And it's, once you get the punch and the kicks, they're like, oh my God. Oh. And Muay Thai it's people think, oh, it's just punching, kicking, knee, elbow. No, there's so much involved. There is so much footwork. There's so much. It's a really, really big science and a big understanding. And there's so many different things involved: timing, countering, and especially when I teach Muay Boran as well, because there is so many little things that come into play at the end. Mm-hmm. And you have to be patient to learn all that. You have to be humble. I've had people come here after a week. Oh, I want to get in the ring. And I'm like, okay, get in the ring. They don't know what's going on. Right. I'm sure you've dealt with that too. And it's everywhere. And, that's it. They're like, oh, okay. I'm like, okay, you want to get in the ring? Go ahead. But this takes a long time before you can get in the ring. So yeah, it's all these sports, like you said, jiu-jitsu, all these martial arts are extremely humbling, and it's you have to be ready, you have to be willing to learn, like I said at the beginning of the podcast. And if you're not, you're not going to go anywhere with this.
Yeah, anything, you have to be in a receptive state before
Exactly.
you begin. Otherwise, your own preconceived notions are going to be a wall that you're never going to be able to get beyond until you're able to. I mean, it's like a cliched phrase, but you have to be able to empty your cup. If I were to walk into like a HEMA gym or something, for that example, I feel like I'm an expert at fighting with weapons or whatever. But if I were to walk into a place like that and be like, well, I'll just kick your ass, like you're not going to be able to stop me, I'm already good at blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to get anything out of it.
No,
when you walk
exactly.
into a situation
Absolutely.
like that, having to say, okay, act like I know nothing to yourself.
Exactly.
Is difficult. And I know I trained, I had Maya Soderholm on here not long ago, and I had an occasion to train with her. And when I came to her, she basically said, what do you want from me? Like, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
And I said, I want you to treat me like I don't know anything. And like you just got me off the street and I was just some guy. And so she was okay. And so she started me out with like balance and body movement and whatever. And we did that for a big chunk of what the time that we were working together. And she did dump a lot of information to me, but then she kind of was almost apologetic. And I said, no, that was what I wanted. I came here and I said, I know nothing. Show me what you do.
Well, that's a big part of martial arts. I mean, you have to be extremely humble. You have to be, humility is part of it, and it teaches you humility. And if you've had the proper training, proper teachers, you always stay humble. You have the confidence, but you have to be humble.
Right.
And I use this all the time as an example. I always say, if you are full of knowledge, you're like a branch of a tree with full of fruit, and you're bent. And when that branch has no fruit on it, it's like this. So it's like guys that walk around like that. Those are the guys that don't know much.
Right. Yeah.
And if your head down and you're humble, you're nice. And a lot of people meet me for the first time, and then they ask me what I do, what I've done. They're like, oh, you do this? You've done this? I'm like, yeah. You're like, but you don't. I'm like, I don't need to prove and walk around like this to, that's for me, and that's all the knowledge for me. And I use it when I had to, and I'm using it for teaching. And when you're out there and you're with friends and stuff, you don't need to do stuff like that, right? So
there's a level of comfort with yourself that you develop to
you get great confidence. It helps you in life, it helps you with your job, it helps you with your relationship, it helps you with everything. And you cannot mix that with ego. You cannot bring that in. And you've seen with people with high egos and how they go down really fast.
Absolutely.
Very fast. Yep. Very fast.
Yep. The Irishman I just referred to a few minutes ago. We're watching that right now in real time. And it's too bad because I was really a big fan for a long time. And
But you know what, Matt? These days there is a lot of people out there who are unfortunately making a crazy amount of money by acting like that. And there is a lot of them. I don't want to name a lot of them. And there's a lot of them that now coming out of YouTube doing boxing and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And I have absolutely no respect for people like that. My point here would be to young people: do not look at these people as good role models. And because these people care about nothing but a dollar sign. Right. And to me, it's insulting to the sports, whether it's boxing, MMA, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, whatever it is. It's very insulting. And I wish the big head honchos in organizations would realize that and take away titles or stuff like that, because
Yeah.
you know, it's unfortunately, I think the whole thing is, you know, it's the whole world is, it's very different now.
Yeah, people will always watch those spectacle kind of freak fights, whatever you want to call them, but it is disrespectful to people that put their whole lives into something and only make this small amount of money, barely able to, you know, barely
and like
able
you
to
said,
go
some
by.
of them, and some of them, like you said, they can't even talk right now because they've got hit so many times, and they have really bad you know, lifestyles, and they, you know, it's and coming from a fighter myself, you know, if it wasn't for my gym, life would be very difficult.
Right.
You know, and because we didn't choose to go that path, we did it for the true art. And that is unfortunately, you know, you're not rewarded that much, you know, unless you're the clown at the circus.
Right.
It's what I call right now. So yeah.
Yes, we've certainly been seeing the circus clowns. Even I watched the bare knuckle from last week, and even in there, they managed to shoehorn in some people I had never heard of, because I'm not a teenager watching TikTok or what. I don't know any of these people, but they shoehorned some guys in there that I was like, what are, you know, I came to this to watch these actual martial artists go out there and put it all out on the line, and we get these guys who are just having a laugh, basically. I mean, it was insulting to watch, and if you know, I was keeping up with the sort of real-time commentary on things. Even the fans know, but I think these people are trying to just milk every dollar they can out of casual people who are like, oh, this guy who makes funny videos or whatever is going to fight. And, you know, unfortunately, people see dollar signs. I think in some of these cases, when you have a fighter who's at the end of their career and they're willing to do that sort of thing, I don't begrudge them making some money, but it makes me sad to see that that's the point that they're at in their career, where
it's
everything you've done up to this point.
It's very sad they had to come to that. Yeah.
Right.
Very sad.
Yeah. And it's
very,
you know,
very
I think the one positive that's coming out of this is, you know, you're having some serious fighters, guys like Francis Ngannou, really coming to the forefront and saying, well, you know, this is about fighter pay at this point, but you have guys that are putting their whole lives on the line to fight in Muay Thai or MMA or whatever, and they're not making the money the promotions are. And I think these old models that we're working on, based off of what worked for boxing, it's not the way for you know, for professional fighters to get ahead anymore. Unfortunately, I mean, instead of having had things get better, we're seeing more kind of Don King Juniors trying to, you know, make their little name for themselves. But
for sure, yeah, very unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, that's one thing, though, that I think will never go away is true martial artists like yourself.
Thank you.
Doing your part to keep things alive and to, you know, to impress upon your own students and you know, and then they're going to go out in the world. If you have in your, you know, 25 years of running your gym, you know, five people who go out there with the same mindset and the same actual,
it changes things.
Love.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. That matters. And it's something that it's part of the reason why I want to do this podcast, to be honest, is so that people can thank you very much. I want people to be able to see who the real martial artists are, so that their only view of the sport is not, you know, professional MMA or boxing, because that's what a lot of people see and know. And if that's what they want and that's what they want to get into, even still, you'll be more successful if you have and successful in the rest of your life, your longevity, if you've come to it from you know, a true martial arts standpoint. Yeah. And I don't necessarily think, you know, true martial arts has to be the woo-woo. It can be things like, if you've ever trained Muay Thai, there is no question about whether it works.
Oh,
If you've done
absolutely.
jujitsu,
Absolutely.
there's no question about whether it works. I won't say any arts. One of my rules, I have two kind of major rules on here that I haven't had to tell most people, but it's no, getting too deep into modern politics. But my other one is no directly crapping on any one style. So I
For
won't
sure.
say
For
anything
sure.
that I think, except for the pressure point. We can, George Dillman. Someday I'll get you on here, George Dillman, and you will answer. But I think that getting the word out there that people can have a full life of training martial arts rather than just being a prize fighter is very important, because for a lot of people, there's not that many prizes. There's not that, that every single person that wants to train martial arts cannot make a living out of it.
Yeah,
That's just the
but
way.
it does help you with life.
Absolutely.
Like you said, it does help you with life out there. It makes you set goals and makes you go out there and be confident in, and be ready for obstacles in life.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's really helped me all my life. And I had to deal with a lot of obstacles in my life, and being a martial artist really, really helped me. And that's what I try to teach. And I think that's very important.
I think that's very, very important as well. Well, Kru Medhi, thank you so much for coming on here today. I really appreciated your time.
Thank you so much.
As I said to you before, as soon as James mentioned that he thought you'd be willing to come on, I said, you go talk to him and see if he'll do it, because I'm aware that you just have this breadth of experience that a lot of people do not have. And I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man.
I'd like to
having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm really looking forward to the next time I'm able to make it up to Vancouver, because I'm going to make some time in my schedule.
Absolutely, for sure.
To visit KB1. Is there anything you'd like to tell the people before we end this thing?
No, I just, hope that, they get all the positive from this. And, if they find an art that they like and it can help them in their life, go and do it. And don't be afraid, be strong. And thank you so much for having me. I really love sharing my stories. I really love sharing the art. I love this art so much. And I look forward to next time we even have another chat on this.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
man.
yeah. I'll have you back for sure. Thank you
Absolutely.
again, Medhi. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
You too, man. Thank you so much.
To those of you guys watching, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.